Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
It's Con John Turk, and this is the Blind Apex Podcast. This episode is going to cover a multitude of topics, but mostly we're going to concentrate on the Daytona 24 hours race that just finished up. Also, what it's like working in pro racing, and maybe get some endurance tips in there. Joining me to discuss this topic is Trevor from StraightChicane. What's going on, Trevor?
Oh, the post-Daytona hangover recovery. So still just not doing a much of anything and catching up on sleep.
You're 5 days out? 5-ish days out, and you're still trying to recover, huh?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's brutal. It's a taxing event, especially now that they've combined the Roar test days and the race into essentially one long event. So I got to Daytona on the 18th, hit the ground running, and was on a plane home on the 30th, I believe. And no days off, no big breaks in between. So it was solid through. And Daytona itself ends up being a 40+ hour workday. And some of us don't get naps or breaks really of any significant kind. So it is quite taxing. And then, I come home and I've got little ones at home now and a girlfriend who's been having to deal with them while I was gone. So I can't completely flake out and just go full comatose. I do have some responsibilities at home, which is a strange concept to most that know me. But just kind of taking it easy. Did start rewatching the race yesterday as leisure, which is kind of work in a sense. So not completely disconnected and comatose from the world, but doing my best to try to get back to being normal in a normal sleep schedule. Yeah,
so you're doing a post-race wrap-up kind of thing, like trying to figure out what you can do better, the perspectives you're getting, not being where you are, but from behind the camera, that kind of thing. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, and we're looking at all the things we might have missed in the race, and we've got access to quite a bit of data, timing and scoring data from the car. We go back through all of that, and we try to find areas of improvement or things we could have done differently to possibly improve our position, or hindsight being 2020, what we can change in our perspectives and our decision making going forward to make better decisions with limited information in a split second, which so oftentimes happens to the strategist. So we do a lot of those post-race debriefs and reports and things like that, just to understand what could have gone better. Sometimes you do everything right. Sometimes you screw the pooch and everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and you got to figure out what happened and fix it so it doesn't happen again.
So this year at Daytona, what role were you playing, and for what teams were you working for?
So for the Michelin Pilot Challenge TCR class with Road Shagger Racing, a big shout out to my Road Shagger guys. I'm their strategist, and we won the 4-hour in TCR on Friday, which was quite great. Road Shagger now is the only team in TCR that's won the 4-hour Daytona twice. So we're quite proud of that. We either win or wreck out at that race. So it was good that the car held together, stayed in one piece, and didn't end up on the side of the track somewhere this year. That's right, man. Checkers or wreckers there for us. And for AWA, I'm the strategist on the 13 car, but I play a number of other roles on the team as well. I'm sort of the radio technician, one of the 2 or 3 IT guys. My role in the team manual is strategist and problem solver. So when we end up with unique situations or problems that need to be solved, I'm usually the guy that's called in to either consult on how to solve it or go solve it myself. And I got some pretty good examples of getting creative in times of need to have earned myself that title. But even goes down to every morning during the Roar and right up until the morning of the race, I cooked breakfast for the entire team and took that to the track. So, for me to have one title, really just kind of scratches the surface of the role that I play with AWA.
So in that book that has you as strategist, does it also have you as cook?
It has in years past, and primarily because when we came back from the pandemic, AWA is a Canadian-based team, so getting over the border during 2020 was pretty precarious for them, especially on both sides of the border. It was tough to get over to go play with race cars and justify that as work, even though there were waivers for professional sports that could have been done. But on the backside in Canada, if you left and came back, even as a Canadian citizen, you had to quarantine for 2 weeks, irrespective of symptoms, test results, anything. So it just proved to be too big of a burden for a lot of the team to take on. I continued on with Road Shagger that year, but when we came back in 2021 with AWA, there were still lots of unknowns with what was going on, and not one to take risk, because all it took really was one positive, even a false positive on the team, and the whole effort could be nullified for that race weekend. So we did all of our own meals, and I was the team chef as well as the strategist, as well as all the other balls I pick up and make sure that don't get dropped. So it's not something that is new this year or something that's foreign to me. It's actually been something that we've been trailing off, because the efforts in WeatherTech are significantly more than those in Michelin Pilot, and even more so when you add a second WeatherTech car to the team as we have this year. So being team chef is something that absolutely was in my job description in years past, and something we were able to kind of do at least in the mornings when everything wasn't so hectic at the track.
Right. It's an important role. You don't want people's blood sugar dipping and stuff like that. So, somebody's got to do it.
Food's our fuel. If we don't put gas in the race car, it doesn't go. If we don't put good food in our crew, they don't go either. So it's absolutely important, and something we focused on.
So you don't give them caffeine gummy bears and all the Monster they can drink?
No, we don't do that. In fact, I do still do a lot of the supply runs and everything. So I will occasionally sneak a bit of Red Bull or Coca-Cola to some of the guys, should they need it or per request. But no, we try to do we try to be reasonably healthy. We've our team catering snacks aren't potato chips and crackers and Oreos. It's fruit. We do a lot of bars, the good ones, not the junk ones you force feed your kids so they pretend they get healthy things in their lunch. So we do put a fair amount of money and investment into getting good quality snacks and food for all of our guys and gals. So it's like I said, it's important and something that we put a lot of effort into.
I can tell you, my friends, and some of them listen, who are there watching, do not take care of themselves while they're there. It's different being on the other side of the wall, I think.
Yeah, 100%. If I was on that side of it, I would eat nothing but alcohol. So if I were spectating, so I totally understand that side of it. But for us, we've got to perform in a 24-hour race that is bookended by effectively a full workday to most people. So we can't be lollygagging, can't lose focus of our nutrition and our health, because that's ultimately what's going to be able to push us through to the end.
Yeah, I don't think enough people take that into account, and definitely folks, when they're like, "Oh, I want to go endurance racing," there's a little preparation you need to do for yourself before you get into that. But so you've been quite successful in all your roles. Is that when you started StraightChicane, your company, or did you start it and then find success? Let's talk about your company and in all the aspects that you offer.
Okay, so it's a little bit of both. I kind of had to go out on my own Once Mitchum Motorsports, my longtime team and owned by one of my main mentors, Chris Mitchum, who been around. If you're an old NASA Mid-Atlantic guy, he's the son of Richard Mitchum, who of course you absolutely know. So when he took the job offer to go run Action Express, the prototype team in IMSA, we sort of disbanded the Mitchum Motorsports deal, and I found myself kind of on my own. So that's sort of where it started. But obviously, with Mitchum, we had a fair amount of success in Lamborghini Super Trofeo, winning a few championships and a world championship there. And then at that time, I was still with Action Express doing driver assist, I believe, that year. But that segued into my first roles as a spotter, with which I sort of ran with for years and years after that, and really only have been moved back into a strategy role starting in 2021. But yeah, it was one of those things. It was kind of out of necessity. Straight Chicane is me and little old me only. But I consult for a number of teams, have consulted for a number of teams, spotted for a number of teams over the years as well. I mean, in 20 and 21, I sort of became the 911 call in GTD for spotters, because I was in a unique position that I didn't count against IMSA's mandated crew maximums, because I was already there with another series, and I would find creative ways to circumvent some temporary regulations regarding COVID and all this, et cetera, et cetera. And I carried my own equipment, so I was kind of a really easy fit for a lot of teams who maybe had to leave their spotter at home because their essential crew on the team had already pushed them to their maximum number of crew members they were allowed at the track during the COVID years. So yeah, I think I spotted for 6 or 7 different teams in WeatherTech during 20 and 21, just based on who needed it, who was there, et cetera. So that was pretty cool to be able to spread my wings a bit, because I realized in the WeatherTech paddock, I had a pleasant problem of being with Action Express for 7 years and never having to find employment elsewhere in that series, but then realized I had absolutely no network because I haven't had to go find any other work in that series. So it was neat to be able to showcase what I can do in at least one facet of my talents, which is spotting for those guys, while also continuing with with Road Shagger. So yeah, it's kind of wild, but a lot of the things that I do, obviously, strategy and spotting are some of the services I offer. Have offered them outside of IMSA, up to and including the 24-hour series in the Middle East, done TCR Middle East, TCR Canada. I've done Super Trofeo in Europe as well. So I've got some good experience outside of North America and outside of IMSA. Obviously done some stuff in SRO and Pirelli World Challenge over the years as well. And some of the things that I do other than that are, management consultation to help teams understand what they don't know, to know what they don't know, because that's such a critical thing. And it's such an expensive thing to learn a lot of these lessons as a team owner or team manager the hard way, because you're green or you're new to a series. And I also do some driver management and some placement here and there. So, if anybody's interested in getting into like the 24-hour series, for example, I have a number of contacts to get you there and get you placed in good seats. That's something else that I do on top of all of my at-track stuff that earns trophies and wins championships.
Yeah, I would. Maybe you didn't have a good network at IMSA where you were at that point, but I think you networked very well. From the time I met you, you were driving around that little RX-7. You were running around the NASA Mid-Atlantic paddock. You were working for Mitchum Motorsports. I feel like you may not have had that. You may not have had the IMSA connections right there, but you're no stranger to meeting people and really growing in an environment. So I don't think that, well, it's proof now that it's not a big issue for you. You've done it. You're pretty darn successful as far as I'm concerned. Can you talk about where you started in motorsports?
So yeah, it's like it was yesterday. 23 now years ago when VIR
it's not
reopened.
Yesterday. It's not. And you're all grown up with kids. You're so weird.
I have kids. I'm not all grown up. But yeah, it was about 23 years ago when the new VIR reopened. I grew up in Southwest Virginia. It wasn't that far away. And my best friend in high school's dad was flagging corner marshal guy for North Carolina Region SCCA. And he was like, hey, why don't you come down to the racetrack with me? And I was like, all right. And I went down there. I flagged, I'll never forget it, turn 8, which is halfway up the uphill S's. That was my first flag station. And I got a little bit of action that day. We had one guy lose it, spin driver's right, put it into the wall right in front of us. It was kind of cool. And yeah, from then on, I worked a bunch of SCCA races as a flagger. I think it was like a Sark Mars weekend. There was a team, I think they had like 7 or 8 spec Miatas, and they looked pretty put together because everybody had the same shirt on. And that was sort of my litmus test and my metric that I had to go by then. And I went and, as you correctly put earlier, I found the team owner and just started talking to him. And that was Mike Collins with Meathead Racing. And then I started working a lot of the enduros. So the 13-hour charge of the headlight brigade at VIR, may that event rest in peace, as well as the 12-hour at Summit Point. Also, may that event rest in peace. And started working with them and doing refueling and kind of understanding things. And, even in those early years, I had, I think, 2 regulations in the 12-hour at Summit Point rule book on refueling written against me because of things that I had figured out and done. You can't do it in anything else now, so I'll spill it, but you can get about a half gallon extra into a spec Miata if you drag the driver's side up first before you refuel it. So that was one trick that got outlawed, and that was little old me almost now, 20 years ago or so. But yeah, I started doing all that, and then it was 1 year for the 13-hour. I don't think Meathead was there, but I ended up in the early days of texting one of the drivers that typically ran with Meathead, Chris Tamburo, who wherever you are, Chris, I miss you, buddy. I'd love to catch up with a beer because you're a big reason I'm where I am in life. But yeah, I texted him. I was like, hey, look, I'm an hour and a half's drive away. I will work for gas money because I didn't drink back then. At that point, I was too young. And he's like, yeah, come on down. Worst case, I'll pay for your gas. We'll figure out something to do. We've got some hotshot Grand Am crew chief running our effort. Well, it turns out that hotshot Grand Am crew chief was Chris Mitchum, Richard's son. And that was also running a team with Scott Michael, who's still running around the paddock these days as well. And I see him every now and then at IMSA events. And yeah, it was one of those, like, I just started doing what I do, and that was whatever needed to be done. And at one point in the race, because I, had basically my entire career at VIR, working corners, doing whatever, I knew a lot of people at VIR. And during the 13-hour, we were trying to figure out how to get our car back on the lead lap and get back in the lead of the race. And this is kind of like where my penchant and my desire to be a strategist and my ability to do so kind of rang through, because we're trying to figure out all this stuff. And I just look up at one point and I go, I know the kitchen staff and I know the corner workers, and I know there's going to be a mandatory caution to deliver dinner to the corner workers shortly. Why don't we plan around that? And so everything else got dropped. I got handed a radio, and I went to the Pagoda at VIR and got the intel on when dinners were being delivered and about when the caution was going to happen. And once the dinners were loaded in the back of the van that was going to circulate the track under yellow to deliver all the stations their dinner, I radioed in and we made a pit stop. It was off sequence, but because of that, we were able to do our full fill, go out. The caution came out. We cycled up behind the safety car and effectively passed everybody and got our lap back and ended up in the lead because of just timing that right. And it wasn't magic. It was just because some little punk kid knew that the corner workers were going to get dinner and knew the people that would know what time it was and figured that out. And that's what eventually won us the race that year, which was pretty cool. And then from then on, I was screwed because Chris was like, whatever I do, you're coming with me. So that's sort of the origin story of how I ended up meeting Mitchum and then eventually moving to Richmond and then Virginia Beach and being employee number one for Mitchum Motorsports and there till the bitter end.
Nice. Yeah, not all races are won on the track, and that's definitely every endurance race I've ever watched or worked. That's definitely the case. I believe I was working a corner daytime for the race that you won, but dusting off some of my old painting suits and running out there because they were shorthanded. But
right.
Yeah. That's interesting because I don't think a lot of people pay attention to that kind of stuff, and it needs to happen. At least at VIR. Did you ever try to spot at VIR? Let's talk about how you spot road courses, because it seems like a huge track to be spotting on. So I'm sure you have more than one, but.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Daytona and COTA, when we used to go there, it's very difficult to get a lot of the track. Laguna is an exception too, because you can basically just go to the hill at the top of the corkscrew and you'll lose 2 or 3 corners, but you have the rest of the circuit. But for a place like VIR, there's a number of different things you have to factor. And first is, where can I see the most of the track? And typically, if you go to an IMSA race at VIR, you'll see a bunch of people in team shirts, binoculars, and radios at turn 4-5 area, because that's where you can legitimately see the most of the track from one place. It also happens to be the best place to do it because you can see entry of turn 1. You can get turn 3. You can call out, passes that are going to develop before the uphill S's. You can see them through the S's, and you can see them out of Oak Tree and onto the back straightaway for about a third of the back straight. So while you can't see everything, you can inform your driver adequately of what's about to happen going into 14 by the end of the straightaway, just based on corner exit out of Oak Tree and how that gap is changing to the car behind or the car in front on that first third of the straightaway. But there's a lot of incidents that happen turn 3-4, big passing zones. If you get up underneath a guy at 3, you can kind of stuff it down the inside at 4, pinch him off, and take the corner at 5A. So it's it's quite important. I mean, the roller coaster is as well, but that's also sort of a difficult area to get around an equal class car. As long as you nail and protect the entry and exit of Oak Tree or roller coaster, excuse me. Very hard to get somebody side by side with you, and going down the hill is not the best side by side place on any racetrack, much less VIR. And as long as you get a decent exit out of Hog Pen, and the drivers do have mirrors on their car, they can manage the gap and understand if something's going to happen into one, and I can protect them from it, or at least give them the information they need to get through the corner in one piece. So 4 is the best place for VIR, and that's pretty well applies to all classes, but there are places like Road Atlanta where you would deviate from condition number 1, which is where is the place I can see the most of the track, depending on what category you're dealing with. You know, for Road Atlanta, for example, turn 5 is the answer to question number 1. Where can I see most of the track? And that's also the answer to where do I spot for GTD cars, for example, and WeatherTech. But that's not the answer for like DPI or GTP cars in WeatherTech. More importantly than that is turn 10, because DPI and GTP cars now are the fastest cars on track. So they're not really looking for traffic behind them, because if there is any traffic behind them, it's for position and they know it's there. The big thing with turn 10 is it's a hotspot for crashes, incidents, spins, and a lot of them are blind areas, especially coming over the crest under the bridge. So you want to be there to help make sure that your guys have no surprises through there. You also want to make sure the pit entry is clear, because with WeatherTech, you've got the pit entry is now on the right side just at the bridge. So that's a blind entry as well. And you also want to make sure that they don't have a car that's got a run on them that's going to be looking down the inside at 1. So there are tracks, conditions, and situations where you would look to, okay, what are the things I need to achieve as a spotter? And you would base where you're located on the track on those questions and those answers.
That makes sense. So my next question is a little bit on driver strategy, because I was watching this year at Daytona and they were talking about, oh, this team's sending so-and-so out to qualify. This person's sending so-and-so out to qualify. The people were trying to figure out what color helmets were getting in, or what color helmets were in the cars, so they could try to figure out what the driver was. I'm assuming at the pro level, they don't have a great disparity in lap times. Maybe 1 second between the teams, right? Like all your drivers on a team, maybe. How do you choose who's going out?
Well, that's an interesting question, and again, one that varies heavily by class. So, for example, your GTD your GTP, or your artist formerly known as DPI, there's not really a big difference, because you've basically got a car where it's full of killers. It's all your platinum drivers, your super golds. It's all factory guys. So the strategy on that end is basically which one of those killers do you want to start the race, and which one do you want to have finish it? And for the 24-hour, that really is qualifying is pretty inconsequential. You just throw in whoever you think is going to do the best job. When you get down to your Pro-Am classes, like LMP2, LMP3, and GTD standard, it gets exceptionally complicated from there, because we have regulations that dictate the skill level of the driver that can qualify the car. So essentially in P2, P3, and GTD, you can't have a gold or a platinum driver qualify the car. And if you have a silver driver qualify the car, they have to be under 30 years old. So for me, for example, in my 13 car, I have 1 bronze driver and I have 0 silvers under the age of 30. So I had only one option to qualify the car without absolutely draconian penalty, which I believe is like a stop plus 5-minute hold at the start of the race. So there's not really opportunity to play games with your starting or qualifying driver when that penalty is that large. That's instantly 3.5 laps down at Daytona, which is not a good place to be. But for the races, those driver lineups and how you use them become a critical part of your strategy, because we face minimum drive times. So for us to be scored at the end of the race, every driver, including the bronze drivers, have to get 4.5 hours of seat time during the race. If they don't achieve that, you basically just get moved to the back and it's like you were never there. So you do have a juggling match of mitigating the difference in pace between your bronze driver and another team's gold driver, which in GTD, that gap is, maybe 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds a lap. When you get to the higher, like you get to the Pro-Am prototype categories, there's upwards of 3 seconds a lap in some cases difference between the fastest guys and the slowest AMs. So at 3 seconds a lap, you can very easily go a lap down solely on green flag pace over the course of a single stint. So you have to manage and mitigate those gaps and not go a lap down and use your entire driver lineup the most sensible way possible and the fastest way possible without losing that advantage or going a lap down and having to claw back a deficit. So it begins to get incredibly difficult. So I think too with LMP3, that's the hardest class call race strategy for in WeatherTech. GTD Pro and GTP now, they're pretty straightforward. Again, everybody's fairly on the same playing field. It's all factory guys. They're killers. You're not having to manage pace deficits. And LMP3, you've got pace deficits where they legitimately can be large enough that you have to be mindful of where you are and what that difference is, or you'll find yourself a lap down or multiple laps down over the course of a race. And it's the same with LMP2. LMP2 has pretty big differences between their gentleman drivers and their pros in those cars, especially because those cars have carbon brakes and they're not the most easy thing to drive. So, really, absolutely the driver order during the race, not so much qualifying for the 24, is a huge component to what we have to manage during the race, not just going fast or when we pit stop or anything like that. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, I can only imagine you're trying to set up a strategy and you've got a 3-second gap on your driver's list, and you're getting into sections where you need to nurse the car maybe, or you need to crank it up some. Have you ever had to slow down your fastest driver and just be like, set this lap time because this is what we need?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, if you were watching the 24-hour this year, every LMP3 car except one, which was ours that won, had major mechanical issues. And so you absolutely have to finish the race and not go in the garage to win it. And that's exactly what that car did. Ours, we had an unavoidable incident, unfortunately, that took us some time to fix because nothing on those P3 cars is quick change. But yeah, you absolutely, in a lot of cases, have to manage your pace. And, a very good example of that was in 2020 when Roadshagger won the 4-hour Daytona. That was the first. There's somebody on their team called a really, really, really good strategy. And we ended up with like a 9-second lead over the field and going into the final stint. So every lap was giving John Morley a lap time target to hit. And that was exactly the lap time that the car in second place was hitting. So we were just managing our equipment, managing our pace, and just matching the car behind us. And if P2 wicked it up 0.4 of a second, I told Morley to wick it up 0.4 of a second. And after about 30 minutes of that, of just not being able to get ground on the first place car, you really kind of crush your opponent's souls. So there are situations where, yes, you absolutely want to manage the pace, because you could easily, in that situation, you could just go out and light the world on fire and open that gap up to 30 seconds. And then a caution comes out and you've blown your tires off. And now all of a sudden P2 is on your bumper going to a restart with 4 laps to go and your equipment is shit and you lose the race. And that's, that comes up all of the time. You just have to understand where you are in the race and what your objectives are. And especially in endurance racing, to not burn down your shit. There's no nobility in setting the fast lap of the race in hour 12 and then be sitting on the side of the track because you've blown a half shaft or you've chewed your transmission up or you've shaken the bodywork off because you're too aggressive on the curbs to the bus stop. There's just no nobility in that. Nobody gives a shit about the fast lap of the race. It's 24-hour Daytona. They care about who gets the Rolex at the end. So it's absolutely an important aspect. And that's something, again, as a race strategist, you have to manage. You're looking at the gaps, you're looking at where you need to be. And you're also looking at, well, we've got a car that's not meant for 24-hour racing. We have to make sure it doesn't fall apart and stay together.
Yeah. That breaking their spirit and not letting them pick up pace, that's real. And at the same time, if you're dangling that bait out there, even if you let them gain a second once or half a second here, half a second there, give up a couple seconds and then put the 9 seconds back on them, for a while, they're going to consume their car. They're going to eat it, right? That driver is going to be like, I can still catch him. I can still catch him. And then they're going to cook their stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that strategy stuff is well, I mean, it's literally things that I've sat on the back deck of my old house with Matt Leach and Rex. And we were like, if we ever bought an endurance car, this is what we do. We just, crack beers and talk about it. And you actually went out and did it. So good for you. I can barely handle my sprint cars right now. So my poor car melts down tires. So
well, you got to get on
when
top
you're I'm managing tires in a 45-minute race, like terribly managing them. But yeah, you're being a good boy and you're taking tire temperature spreads and pressures, right? Yeah, but I'm on a McPherson strut front wheel drive, so the front end just cooks. So
yeah, all the TCR cars are front wheel drive too, man. And we're all on McPherson's. You just have to look at what you're doing. Yeah, well, there you go. But you just have to be mindful of that too, and some of that can come down to how you drive it. If you're over driving into corners, you're going to cook your tires no matter what the setup is. So there's a fair amount of things that you can do, but there's a lot of front wheel drive race cars on McPherson's and even Pirelli's. We're on Michelin's in our TCR, so we've got a really good tire underneath of us. But yeah, there's certainly things that you can do even behind the wheel to help mitigate that. Of course, it's front drive. You're gonna use up the tires because you're doing everything with those front tires. But yeah, you can make them work and you can make them last.
Yeah, I'm working on it. I've only raced the car 4 weekends, so I keep complaining about it, but I just need to put in a little more work. It's close. It's close to where I need it. So.
You need the seat time too, man. It's important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know some folks that are trying to possibly get in to some lower level endurance races this year just to get chunks of seat time, say for nationals for NASA. So I have a lot of folks going, hey, do you know anybody who's got a seat in Champ Car, Chump Car, whatever, AER, anybody who's running at Pit Race, because that's where Champs is this year. Okay. I couldn't believe how many people were actually hitting me up for that because if I know somebody, I don't know anybody that's running those, and I also don't know if there's any at Pit Race, but just the extremes folks are going to go to get seat time. So that's pretty crazy to me anyway. So what does the future hold for you? So you're coming off your Daytona high. You've given your girlfriend a break. You've been watching the kids. What's the next race for you? Because I basically only see the Daytona pictures where you were on the roof. I saw it for years and I was like, dang, I really want to be there. But I haven't been there. But what else occupies your time? Where else are you heading this year?
Well, we're going to next race for IMSA is 12 Hours of Sebring. So we'll have same efforts there. The TCR effort will be in full force, looking to get a second Sebring win, but also the 12 hour with both the 13 and the 17 LMP3 cars. And that's LMP3's first points race for the championship. Daytona is a non points race outside of the Endurance Cup for P3. So that's really just going for glory, which the 17 car did. So we're super proud of that. We'll look to back it up at the 12 hour Sebring. It's half as long, but the track is 3 times as harsh. And if the mechanical issues that were presenting themselves at Daytona were any indication, I think it's the prep of the car for Sebring is going to be the key to the race before anybody even unloads a truck once they get there. But we had some pretty optimistic running last year. Got a test lined up this year before we arrive, so we'll mind our P's and Q's, dot the I's, cross the T's, and put forth the best effort to try to keep our good streak going in these long run endurance races at IMSA. And then after that, it's oh god, I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. I think it's Laguna Seca after that. But and then we start getting into the swing of the summer months where it's one of everything, and might throw in a few WRL races here and there over the summer, as I did last year, which is kind of cool. So I got to keep my my spotting credentials, because I did some spotting / strategy for WRL with Kingpin Racing last year, and helped make a pretty big difference on how they run and keeping the car straight and in one piece, and outwitting a lot of those guys who don't look at the race from a strategist standpoint. So it's always fun to kind of take a step back out of the high pressure of the super professional environment and go down and play a little club racing every now and then too. Keeps me on my toes.
At least they don't have themes on their car and stuff, so they take it a little more seriously than other endurance racing series in the club world. So
yeah, for sure.
As far as your Sebring prep, if it's a grade 8 bolt, make it a grade 10. If it's a inch thick, make it 1 1/4 inch, like whatever it takes.
Yeah,
I've heard stories
with go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I mean I think there's a story like Andretti said that he went, or Andretti or Fittipaldi, one of them went testing there one time in the 70s with the Formula One team or something, and he was urinating blood. So it's pretty rough. They haven't fixed any of it. And apparently, I think it's like 2 World War II retired airstrips with some asphalt they put in between. So
yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it is. A lot of the surface is still, I guess now, 70-year-old plus concrete. And we're putting so much forces through them now with stickier tires, higher downforce, the loads that are being applied to it, quite literally or shred that track apart. I mean, I remember one year I was spotting for the 12 hour, and because a certain corporation's risk department doesn't like fun, we're not allowed to do this anymore. But the way you spot at Sebring is you rent a 50-foot scissor lift and you put it inside of turn 1, because at that point you can see about 60% of the track. The only way to really effectively spot at Sebring, maybe I'll tell you the story about how I got around that during the pandemic without getting into too much trouble or getting a phone call from Daytona Beach, Florida. But
let's not get you in trouble.
But well, trouble's my middle name, man.
I can stop the recording and you can tell me later.
Oh yeah, it's not the first time I've gotten a phone call from a 386 area code. But I was on my 50-foot scissor lift morning warm up of the 12 hour, and just offline in turn 1, the track had come apart about the size of, I don't know, maybe like a large serving plate, but it was deep enough that the track services guy could put his whole boot in it, and it swallowed him down to the ankle. So there was, emergency track repair straight away with the 12-hour beginning in like 2.5 hours or something. So, and that's not the only occurrence where the surface is proved to be a problem. But it's Sebring, and it's Sebring for a reason. And we go there because it's old and shitty, and that's its character.
They call it historic.
Oh yeah, that's its character. But to be honest with you, I don't think we need billiard table circuits like they have in Europe at every place that we go to. I like the intentionally shitty racetracks too, because they do have character, and you have to drive around them as a driver, and you have to prepare for them differently as a team. One good example of that is, I know a lot of people who don't like Watkins Glen anymore because it's smooth and there's lots of grip, and it's not terrible anymore. They much preferred it before the repave because it was actually a challenge to drive. Now a lot of these cars, you could just sail them up the S's and not have to worry about keeping control of the car, or you could just sail it into the bus stop and the grip's going to catch you. So there's not always benefit to making a track surface perfect. In fact, in a lot of ways, you can destroy a racetrack by doing so. So I know there's a lot of guys that are, jokingly on the repave Sebring bandwagon in some of these IMSA groups on Facebook, but I think it would just be a really terrible race if you did that. It would just get boring.
Facebook has a group for everything.
Yeah, they do.
Seriously.
They do.
So when they were patching that 2.5 hours or 2 hours before the race, are they just using like bag hot quick patch stuff and just tamping it down and let her rip?
No, they used some sort of epoxy, and they were on it with torches trying to get it to cure.
Okay.
And I think it held up.
Because I can tell you why it's crappy if they're using that stuff from Lowe's or Home Depot and just throwing that bag in there. That stuff is terrible.
I've seen places do that, man, and it just doesn't hold up. You're like, that's going to go 3 laps, and then it's going to be everywhere, and it's going to cause more trouble than it helped. But and Sebring's tough because we, in the age of homologation, we are disallowed from doing anything, really. So for us, we can't beef up the hardware on the car for Sebring. We have to use hardware that's spec'd for the car. We can't change anything. We can't even, change the alarms on the dash. We can't change the way the dash looks, which is, that's a feature that you can get from a Raspberry Pi based dash system for $150, all the way up to $15,000 Bosch systems and everything in between. But as teams, we're not allowed to even change how all that's arranged. Everything is stock. We can't even change the seatbelts in the car, and they are literally the cheapest harnesses with an FIA certification on them. They're $121 US a set, and they're fucking terrible.
That's terrible.
So we've got cars that are doing 88 miles an hour at Daytona, and our harnesses cost less than $1 per mile an hour we're traveling. And they're meant to protect a driver, and we can't even change them in the interest of homologation. I mean, there's a laundry list of things, and it's, the homologation is meant to be cost savings, but the reality is in LMP3, we're not allowed telemetry in the cars. We're the only class in WeatherTech that's not allowed it, which causes a whole host of issues in terms of, not being able to get off circuit when we have a mechanical failure, like other cars do, because they can see the mechanical failure coming in the data and the telemetry live, so they can tell the guy, hey, you're losing a motor, just pull off. Whereas we have to blow the motor up and dump oil all over the track to know whether or not the motor was going. But telemetry is one of those things, because everybody immediately their mind goes to, oh, it's a $50,000 plus investment to get the Bosch system. When the reality is there's a company that has the IndyCar contract, so they're exceptionally legit, that would be able to put a telemetry system beyond adequate for an LMP3 car for like $7,000. So we're talking like many multiples less. And while $7,000 for a lot of racers is a lot of money, that might be their entire car build. For us, that's about 3.5 to 4 sets of tires. So the budgetary load of putting telemetry in a car is not there, and that's kind of a bullshit argument. But the reality is, we can't even change seatbelts. But on the flip side, there's a homologated drink bottle system for the Duquesne and the Ligier, and you can't take that out or not order the car with it and replace it with like a $70 Camelback. And the price tag on that drinks bottle system is like $4,000. So you either have it or you don't. And, there's one team that in Prototype Challenge a couple of years ago almost got bumped from a race because they had a Camelback in the car because they didn't feel the need to spend $4,000 on a drink bottle system. And they almost bumped them.
You'd spend $4,000 $4,000 on a drink system, and you spend $121 on safety.
Exactly.
I think the priority in that rule set is a little off, let's say.
Yeah, the philosophy there is quite bad, and it's sad that every chump car on the planet has better safety belts than LMP3 cars in WeatherTech, and that is not an exaggeration.
Yeah, that's actually frightening. But as much carnage as you can see at a racetrack, and I've seen a lot of it, I prefer not to skip on safety. Could be my background from the tech shed also.
Yeah, exactly. And the best belts in the world are like $700. So it's not like teams are going to go broke trying to find the best seat belts on the planet and try to get an edge there for driver change. It's like there is unquestionably one that's the best, and it's $700. Like why would you not do that? And it would make the driver changes a bit better. But at the same time, they're belts that don't loosen up. They're belts that properly fit over the Hans. They're belts that are tried, tested, and there's a reason everybody uses them in endurance racing. So the philosophy on that is silly to me, and there's no leg to stand on the other side of that argument as far as I'm concerned.
Are you guys still? I know at the amateur level they use the workout bands and stuff to pull belts out of the way and stuff. That you guys can't even do that, I'm sure.
So we're allowed to do that on the lap belts. We were allowed to do it on the shoulder belts up until about 2017 or 18, I think, because, again, there was false safety concern that a driver in a car on fire might need to get out and might get caught up in those. And never mind the fact that we use like 15-pound rated zip ties on there. And if anybody's on fire, they're not going to get held up by some surgical tubing that's zip tied together with the weakest of zip ties. Yes. So it's just sort of the silly things that we deal with on a high level. And but we are allowed to do them on the laps for whatever reason. I guess they're less likely to snag a guy, but at the same time, if you're getting out of a car, even if somebody's pulling you out of a car while you're unconscious, you're getting through those tubing. Yeah.
That tubing is easy, and if they're pulling somebody out, the EV guys all carry knives. They can cut something out of the way pretty quick. Not like they're running around with nothing. So,
right.
So this sort of the theme I've heard a little bit through this whole conversation is you really have to know the rules. You need to know the rules on how your car can be set up. You need to know the rules for how the driver changes are going. You need to know the rules so you can maybe get around things like putting another half gallon of gas in a Miata so you can run for another 4 hours on that half gallon.
Right.
So endurance guys, it equally applies to sprint race guys. I really do. Knowing your rule book. For NASA, it's the CCR. For SCC, I don't know what it is. I don't remember what they call it, but whatever. You need to know your safety rules, your overall rules, and then you need to know your class rules because it's important that you don't get caught stepping out, but you can also find those soft spots to give you that little bit of an advantage. A little bit of an advantage stacked up 5 times becomes a lot of bit of an advantage as far as I'm concerned. So you want to look into that kind of stuff. Just don't be like Trevor and get in trouble for it all the time. But
well, I am the rules lawyer for AWA, so that's right up my alley. And again, it goes back to that fateful 13-hour with Mitchum where we finally met, where I knew the rules dictated there was going to be a mandatory yellow for dinner time, and figured out how to exploit that. And that's not out of the realm of possibility in the real world. And rule books change. I do not like getting penalties like anybody else. So it's important to know what gets you those penalties, but it's also important to know the rules so that when unforeseen circumstances or situations come up, that you can act on them better than all of your competition. And there's been a lot of cases like that. But primarily one of them was IMSA in late 2020, I believe. They changed the rule for pit opening during short yellows. So in IMSA, they have 2 full course yellow periods. One's a short yellow, one's a standard yellow. So in a standard yellow, pits close, safety car gets deployed, all the cars get packed up. Then we follow a pass around procedure. So basically any car that's ahead of their class leader in the line gets waved around the safety car and they go to the back of the line so that there's no undue advantage gained by the leader in each class, respective of where their competition was relative to the overall leader. Once that's done, we open the pits for prototype and WeatherTech, for example. All of your GTP, P2, and P3 cars are allowed to come into the pit lane and do full service. Then the next time by, the pit's open for GT only. So only GT cars can come in, do their full service. Then after that, the pit's open for everybody. We have a final wave-by procedure, which is exactly the same as the wave-by procedure earlier. Basically just reorders cars to get back in place so there's no undue advantage gained by the leader. And then we do class splits, so GTP cars pass everybody, get to the safety car, so you end up with the entire GTP field behind the safety car, and that's they're uncontaminated by slower class cars when they go to restart. But they also do a prototype class split where all LMP2 and P3 cars get to cycle ahead of the GT cars so that they can have their own start as well, and there's not huge intermixing of multiple classes of cars racing one another going into turn one, which is what causes calamity. And that process does mitigate a lot of breed yellow, full course yellows that come right after a restart. The short yellow version of all that is basically everything above except the pits don't ever open. So we don't do the pits open for prototype, don't do pits open for GT. The pits stay closed. But late in 2020, they did an amendment to that where the pits would open after the last car in line crossed the start-finish line on the last pace lap. So basically, you could follow the safety car into pit lane and do your pit stops and service. And in 2021, when AWA won the 4-hour at Daytona in GS with our McLaren, I think it was myself and one other guy had read the rule book. And there was a short yellow that concluded with like 54 minutes left to go in the race, which is enough time to make it on a tank of fuel. So I was able to pit Kuno Whitmer of GTLM championship fame with Riley and the Viper back in 2014 or 15. I pit him. We did our full pit stop. We were good to go to the end. And he basically went out per my request to just qualify because he had no traffic. We were something like 90 seconds behind the leader. We're in clean air. So he just started putting in qualifying lap after qualifying lap after qualifying lap. When everybody else came to pit under green, we were so far ahead of them. It took the commentators 2 laps to realize that we were like 17 seconds ahead of everybody else in the class. And that was largely what won us that race, was just being able to put ourselves in that position. And that solely came from me knowing the rule book, and everyone else in my class, bar one guy, didn't. And Chris Mitchum actually came up to me after that. He was like, that's called the Trevor rule now. And I'm like, yeah. But there's absolute advantage to understanding every facet of your rule book and understanding how that can be used to your advantage. It's unquestionably a weapon.
Yeah. The rule book and knowing procedures, the official procedures, are pretty important. And in endurance racing, you get to exercise them much more often. In a sprint race, you might get to exercise it once, but in 24 hours, that could be, 15, 20 times maybe, depending on how crazy the event is. So I have a couple of saved questions for you.
Okay.
Because I'm mostly interested. I have no idea how you do it, but so one's a serious one and one's a goofy one. You talked about the pass by rule. How the heck do you keep track of that? Because my understanding is you have to know that you did it and you do it correctly. And then, because they don't tell you can pass by, you have to know your status at all time, right?
That's correct. So we have a couple of tools at our disposal that everybody has up and down the pit lane. One of those is we have the CCTV feed of all or most of the TV cameras simultaneously. So I have one large screen on our timing box that, for Daytona, for example, were 16 camera angles. Some of them were fixed cameras on the side of the track, one on the roof. A couple of them were in cars, which are of little use, but we can see, for better or worse, almost turn by turn. Again, coming from the spotter stand, I absolutely hate it because I see significantly less on those TV screens than I do with my own eyes where I am on the track. So it's a bit of discomfort for me personally, because those TV cameras, I'm at the mercy of the operator, and they're looking for a show, not necessarily what's good for me and what I need to know in the moment. The other tool that we have is live timing and scoring. Now, there's a couple of software providers that do really, really good world-class timing and scoring work. One of them is HH Timing, which I use with AWA, and the other is P1TS, which is a longtime friend of mine, Ken's company, which we use at Roadshagger. So I have the unique opportunity to use both of these, and these are software licenses that are in the thousands of dollars annually. They're not cheap, and they're not really accessible to the spectator, but they're very powerful, and they can tell us a lot of things. Primarily, one is an estimated position on track. We only have 3 sectors in IMSA now, because of some tomfoolery of a particular DPI team a few years ago and manipulating BOP. So now the competitors don't get any useful information in terms of sector times. But we do have general ideas where the cars are. And then one of the advantages that we have is I have spotters, that a number of which I've trained myself. So I lean on them to help me fill in the blanks left over by the TV cameras and by the software that's still trying to guess where the car is until it actually hits a solid timing loop. So I can keep track of all of that. And, the safety car is generally in IMSA quite good at picking up the overall leader. A lot of other series I can't say the same for that I've worked with and in over the years. But it's quite easy to understand where that overall leader is. And you're just kind of keeping track of your position with him. And so I'm not only watching my race, I'm watching the overall leader's race and how those change, because an overall leader makes a pit stop and a yellow comes out. Now the new overall leader is in a totally different spot. So you have to kind of be aware of where they are, where you are at the time. But as I said too, you also have about half a lap to a lap under yellow for everything to sort of cycle through and cycle out to know where it is. But that's not always the case too. I've got stories with, there's a really good one about TCR, the 4 hour at Watkins Glen 2019, where it was probably the most complicated and convoluted positioning of class leader, overall leader in the safety car I've ever encountered. And I had a couple of good ones this year too. towards the end of the race. But yeah, it's not an easy task, but it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise you screw it up. And if you screw up a pass around in IMSA, it is the most draconian penalty you can get. It's basically a stop plus the safety car lap time at 60 miles an hour, and you have to serve it under green. So under almost every circumstance, that costs you 2.5 laps. So at Daytona, for example, it's a stop plus 3 minutes, 50 seconds. And you're doing minute 45 lap times. So not only are you losing 2 laps and 20 seconds worth of time, you're losing the time you're having to traverse down pit lane at 60 kilometers an hour, which is 37.5 miles an hour, when all of your competitors are doing 180 on the oval side by side with you. So you lose a huge amount of time in pit effect, the time it takes to traverse pit lane, and then the time it takes to sit there for 3 minutes and 50 seconds. So it is one penalty you don't want to get.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. So my more goofy question goes back to your spotting days when you sit up on the roof of Daytona. How do you go to the bathroom? Do you wear Depends or something?
No, not generally. And Daytona is less climatic with the bathroom question because we have 2 very good bathrooms up there on the roof, and they're nice because nobody but the spotters use them. So there's not a lot of fans missing the seat because they're 24 beers deep 6 hours into the race.
Right.
Not a lot of guys throwing up there. So, it's real easy to do it up there. The interesting ones come when you're in a 50-foot scissor lift over turn 1 at Sebring International Raceway with 30 minutes left to go. It's going to be green. You got a horse in the race, and you got to go because you got to drop down off the lift, about a 10-minute walk to the closest portalettes, and then you got a 10-minute walk back, and then you got to raise the lift. Well, you're also in a lift with a couple other guys whose horses are also in the race. So there may or may not have been a time where a couple of spotters and I were peeing in camping toilets 50 feet over the Sebring International Raceway. About a half an hour to go. The race still running. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. No,
I mean, we may or may not have been doing that. That I could just be telling the story for shock value, but
I would. I'd be like, you stand right there for a minute. I gotta pee in this Gatorade bottle.
Well, you in years past, if you saw 3 spotters facing away from one another on opposing corners of the scissor lift, you might have a good idea what's going on there.
That's fair.
Supposedly. Allegedly.
Supposedly, yeah. What? No actual truth is told, but allegedly.
No, that's all tall tales and big stories.
Stories he tells his kids.
Right.
Not real stories, fairy tales.
So actually, on the note of your previous topic, I am out of camping toilets. So can we take about a 60-second breather here?
Yeah, go for it. I'll run too. All right, bet. Did you make it back yet?
I am back.
Sweet. So that'll be fun in editing. I haven't had to do that yet, so challenge for me. I'll take it all day. Or I'll just leave it in there and people will be like, what in the hell?
Maybe they'll think it's a good time for them to go too.
Right?
We could start.
Most people are driving or working in the garage, I think.
Well, so, if you get creative, you can go to the bathroom in those places too.
Oh, yeah. Always. So my last real question is, do you have any tips for those amateur race teams? Say they're a Lemons team. Lemons teams. They got the themes. Some of them are pretty serious. Very few of them are very serious. But I feel like at least in endurance racing, there's like a progression. You go to Lemons and Chump and Champ and, then you can start focusing on things. But as you progress up, what's important for a young endurance team to recognize?
Well, there's a number of things. that really
You don't have to give away secrets, but get them thinking.
They're pretty universal truths for any level of endurance racing. Obviously, a lot of it goes into prep. You've got to make sure that your car's together. You can't miss bolts. You just have to make sure everything is torqued. Mind your P's and Q's, nut bolt everything. Make sure you understand things like how far your brakes can go. If you're running an 8-hour race and you've got brakes that last 4, you're in a bad spot and you need new brakes. That's the kernel of success in an endurance race is your prep. Because if your car lets you down, it's very, very hard for you to make up the time. Nary impossible in a lot of cases. And we saw that again with LMP3 in WeatherTech at Daytona this year. I mean, nearly every car but one had big mechanical issues. And no car but that one won the race or even stood a chance. I mean, the 17 car won by like 13 laps, I think. And that was after it was taking it easy. So it's absolutely critical that you do everything in your power, do your due diligence to make sure your car stays together in one piece. And also remember, endurance racing, it's not the fastest car that wins. It's the car that's better over the average of an entire race. And so ways you can reduce that average without increasing the pace of your car is not just driving consistently, but not making mistakes. Might be a little slower, but if you don't put the car off, you don't hurt the car, you don't tag the wall, you're ultimately going to be faster than maybe the faster guys that do those things. Look at your pit stops. How do you reduce time in your pit stop? By changing a small piece of equipment or the choreography of it, or how you look at the pit stop as a whole. Are you timing them? Do you even know how long your pit stops take? Because that was one thing that was big when I was doing Miata endurance racing. And one of the reasons we won the inaugural 12-hour at Summit, or 12-hour at New Jersey that replaced Summit Point was, I was a driver changer and a strategist in Grand Am at the time. So I went to that race like it was a professional race. And I had my driver changes and my pit stops so superior to literally every class car. We went second overall in a showroom stock Miata because I was literally crushing people by entire laps on pit stops. We had minimum pit stop times. It was 1 minute. So I knew that I could get my driver change done, car refueled, and a driver change back in about 60 seconds. So I was right at the minimum. And everybody else was taking upwards of sometimes 15 to 20 seconds longer just to get the driver out before the fueling could start. And their refueling process and procedure was slow. Then I got another 20 seconds on them when the guy went back in the car, sometimes more. So, you really have to look at that, because if your pit stops aren't as reasonably close to the minimum time that they're allowed, you're giving something up to somebody else. And you're never going to know it until it's too late. You might not ever know it. But that was one of the things that was critical in that race was our pit stop. Every time we came to pit lane, we just crushed everybody. And we were by no means the fastest car on track. I had 2 guys that, do highway construction and 1 real estate agent in my car. I didn't have a pro like some of the other cars. In fact, the SSM car that almost beat us, even though they were severely illegal on their fuel tank as it came out later, they had like the guy from New Jersey Motorsports Park in the car, and he absolutely crushed my guy. But it was because we knew our fuel tank and we destroyed everybody, including them on pit stops, that put us in a position to win. And we won that race on the last corner of the last lap. And I still have the timesheet somewhere. We won by 3.6 seconds. Because even with a 14-gallon tank over the 10.5-gallon tank that we had, they still ran out of fuel at the end, and we didn't. So that was a cool moment in my history. That was my first win as a race strategist in anything, and that was, 13, 14 years ago now. But yes, don't leave time on the table anywhere that you can reasonably help it. Everybody's focused on lap time and driving, but you can have a fast car that burns off your tires, and then you're slow on your average over a stint. If you don't pay attention to your pit stops and you don't optimize them, you're leaving time on the table. And oftentimes it'll be chunks of time that no one, even Michael Schumacher in his prime in your car, could overcome. So there's just lots of things that people don't tend to focus on that are absolutely important, and something that we would never overlook on a professional level.
Awesome. One thing that I picked up from you in our conversation today is that I believe the more serious you start getting, especially if you consider yourself a team or you have a team and you're not just always getting rental drivers and you're running a one-man show, seems like you guys do a lot of formal roles and responsibilities. And I think that helps make sure things like nut and bolt checks are done appropriately, make sure you have food, water, all that stuff. So look to formalize your endurance race program a little bit more. I think that would be a good idea for most folks. Would you be apt to, through Straight Chicane, to help consult with some of these guys who are evolving, maybe to, was it AER and WRL, consult on their teams?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and you said it, and organization is one of those upgrades you can do in motorsport that's free. You just better organize yourself. It makes a world of difference, and organization is free. You don't have to go buy fancy equipment or $10,000 pit guns or have any of the shit that we have. If you better organize yourself and you're organized better than you're racing against, you've already got a leg up. Well, it doesn't matter who they've got in the car. It doesn't matter how fast their car is. If you're better organized, you will win against those that aren't. And that's important. And, it's something that, like I said, I enjoyed doing a few WRL races last year. I enjoyed, a couple of times coming back to do some club stuff here and there. And I do appreciate, one of the things that I really get off on, and it's kind of an ego stroke, is I love being a catalyst for improvement, whether it's with a driver, with a team, whatever it may be. If I can come in and make a big difference, that's the win for me. So yeah, I'm totally open to doing some stuff like that with AER, WRL, or whomever. It's one of those things where that's something that I can come in and I know right off the bat would make a huge difference with minimal time and investment. Yeah.
That sounds great, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I know we haven't caught up. I need to come down, see you and your new sprawling family. But I think that's a wrap, man. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Anytime you want to come on, Mike's open for you. We've been doing this stuff a long time together, apart, still working the same kind of stuff. So, it's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure's all mine. And, I appreciate the offer. And sure, anytime you need somebody on to just talk, I think it's pretty clear, anybody that knows me, that I never shut up if given the opportunity. So that's one of the things that makes me good, because that's what I do, is I live my life and make my living on a radio talking to somebody out there. Whether or not they listen to me is a different story. Most of them don't. But yeah, I'm happy to do it. Cool. We get to spend some time together, man. It's been a minute. Maybe one of these days I can make it out to a NASA event again and maybe get back on the starter stand and give my old trademark IndyCar double checkers at the end of the sessions once again.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be fun, man. You can catch Trevor at StraightChicane.racing if you need his help. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.